GI stool maps. So a couple of weeks ago, we did a talk about the microbiome and all the reasons that the microbiome can become disrupted. We talked about things like stress, nutritional deficiencies, pharmaceutical drugs, all the things that potentially can disrupt the microbiome. And this is quite a big subject in the context of healing from long COVID because microbiome disruption is one of the driving mechanisms. So, what I'm going to talk about today is the GI stool map. So, GI stool maps are basically a functional medicine lab that some people decide to do if they continue to have microbiome issues when recovering from long COVID. And what I'm going to speak about is what information will be derived from the GI stool map, and then how to move forward with that information and how to treat. So, to begin with, the GI stool map will test for pathogens. So, um, so pathogens such bacterial, parasitic, and viral can all cause intestinal issues. But it's important to note that not all individuals with positive results will necessarily present symptoms. And many factors will play into this, including your overall health. Some pathogens are just transient and they're passing by and not necessarily causing an issue. So that is something to keep in mind. So this is basically a sample GI stool map, the first page. And as you can see, this person has a type of E. coli, which is basically happens when there is a fecal contamination of food or water, and it can cause symptoms like cramping, fatigue, nausea, and diarrhea. And sometimes it can be a passing thing, like in the case of food poisoning, and we'd have to cross-reference with other with other results in the GI stool map to really understand what it means in a broader context. So another example of a pathogen would be H. pylori. And H. pylori is really common. Around 50% of people have it. Many are asymptomatic, but it also has a role in things like gastritis and also stomach cancer, which is really the kind of the main concern with H. pylori. And although only 2% of people will go on to develop gastric cancer, it's important to check if there's a family history of that to see, how detrimental it really could be for you. And again, H. pylori can be passed on with fecal contamination, but also oral to oral contamination. It's possible to pass it around in a family if you're, for example, sharing water glasses and things like that. And it can cause things like stomach ulcers also, as well as common symptoms like burping and stomach discomfort in general. A lot of people with H. pylori find it hard to wear tight pants or belts, for example, because they just have sensitivity in the stomach. Another thing is that H. pylori, if you have an H. pylori infection, it's important to pay a lot of attention to dental hygiene because it can sometimes live also in the mouth. So the next section of the GI stool map is, here's a botanical treatment for H. pylori. So often when people are diagnosed with H. pylori, they're given an antibiotic protocol, often with 3 different types of antibiotics. But it's possible to kill this bacteria. Well, not totally. We don't want to totally eradicate it, but reduce it to normal levels with something like this kind of protocol, which includes things like licorice, which really supports the mucosal membrane of the gut, mastic gum, which is kind of a tree sap that's known to kill H. pylori, cruciferous vegetables, interphase plus, which is a biofilm disruptor, probiotics, lauricidin, which is also really great for yeast. So this is actually from the Cressa Institute, I believe, as a botanical treatment for H. pylori. So it's good to bear in mind that there are alternatives to just taking the antibiotics that are usually prescribed in the case of an H. pylori infection. So the next section of the GI stool map is about normal commensal bacteria. So as many of you know, I'm sure trillions of microorganisms inhabit the intestine and make up this complex ecosystem that has many different roles in our body. Beyond just gut health. There's a gut nervous system correlation. There's a gut immune system, a gut brain. The gut is really important for almost all aspects of our health. So in this case, this person has low Clostridia. So Clostridia is a prominent and diverse group of bacteria that's usually found in the large intestine. It's important because it produces butyrate, which is a short chain fatty acid, which again is implemented in things like the immune system in particular. So it promotes healthy mucosal barriers, it influences the immune balance, protects against pathogens, and low levels of Clostridia are actually associated with autoimmune conditions. So a treatment for low Clostridia would be to supplement it directly. You can get a Clostridia probiotic supplement. And this is something actually interesting because most broad spectrum probiotic supplements just contain lactobacillus, and some contain lactobacillus and bifido. But it's quite uncommon. Some of these other ones, like Akkermansia, Clostridia, they're less common. So it could be the case that you're taking a broad spectrum probiotic, but what's actually wrong with your gut is another type of bacteria that is not contained in the probiotic, in which case it won't really be helping you. So this is one instance in which it's quite useful to do something like a GI stool map, so you can really be targeted with your probiotic approach rather than just taking something broad spectrum. So of course, supplementation will help in this case, increasing fiber. So things like prebiotics, so things like inulin, a prebiotic supplement like inulin, or for example, things like Jerusalem artichoke, chia, avocados, pears, green banana flour. There are many really great prebiotic fibers, and those prebiotics will feed the bacteria in the large intestine, and those bacteria will then in turn go to produce the short chain fatty acids and butyrate that we really need for optimal health. So sometimes if we have low bacteria that are usually present in the large intestine, it can mean that we're not feeding them with enough prebiotics. So this person would want to take some increased vegetables that have prebiotics, and maybe even take a prebiotic supplement, and then just the normal things of removing sugar and refined carbs, and then removing stress, which is always a large thing when it comes to a large factor when it comes to gut health. So further down here, let's see. Okay, so opportunistic bacteria. So this is usually considered to be dysbiosis. So many people, again, have no symptoms. However, some high levels can cause inflammation, things like diarrhea, loose stools, abdominal pain, constipation. And there are many reasons why, we would have dysbiosis, and it relates to everything that we talked about in the first microbiome talk, which of course relates to diet and stress optimization, pharmaceutical drugs, all of the things that disrupt the microbiome. So in this case, you can see this person has high bacillus, which is a gram-positive bacteria. High levels of it would indicate reduced digestive function, SIBO, or constipation. Um, the next one, Pseudomonas. So it's a gram-negative. Increased levels indicate increased intestinal inflammation, abdominal cramping, loose stools. And this bacteria can actually produce toxins that damage the cells. So Streptococcus, again, is also high. It's a gram-positive bacteria. It lives in the mucous membranes and the skin. High levels result from a low HCl, the use of acid reflux medications such as PPIs, SIBO, or maybe constipation could also be a cause of this. So elevated levels do indicate intestinal inflammation. So usually when it comes to the ways in which we want to address dysbiosis, usually we think about balancing the gut in a holistic way. So, um, increasing the good bacteria that are missing. Um, and then you'll see later on in the GI stool map, there are different inflammatory markers that would indicate poor gut health. There's also an anti-gliadin, which can indicate whether or not we have intolerance to gluten. Um, so we would want to look at all of those things and look at the person's lifestyle, look at their stress, look at their diet, look at the pharmaceuticals they're taking, and then support all of those things to kind of improve the dysbiosis. And the idea being that when the gut is colonized and fed properly with nutrients and with good bacteria, then these opportunistic bacteria or dysbiotic bacteria should naturally die and fall away. And this is definitely a better way to address this rather than using a broad spectrum antimicrobial. So often people will use things like berberine, caprylic acid, garlic oil, urva ursi, olive leaf. These are all examples of a broad spectrum antimicrobial, which you could use in this case. The reason why we kind of need to be careful with that is that sometimes these antimicrobials will also kill good bacteria. And they're also very strong. They can burn the stomach lining if you take them in quantities that are too big. So it's definitely better to just naturally balance, and you can think of it always almost like a battlefield where if you increase the good warriors, they will outnumber these opportunistic dysbiotic bacteria. So that's the idea that we'd want to do to kind of rebalance. So Citrobacter, Prevotella, these two further down in the list, these are associated with rheumatoid arthritis. So that's also important to note in this case. So fungi and yeast. I'm sure many of you know about Candida. There's also a healthy amount of Candida that's fine to exist. It's only when it's overgrown that it becomes an issue. So in this person's case, they have high Candida. So again, the causes for this, it could be antibiotic use. It could be high increase or high intake of things like sugar and refined carbohydrates, and also dietary foods that are fermented. So things like cheese, beer, bread, all of these things will increase the amount of candida in the body and feed the candida if we already have an infection. So some symptoms of high candida are diarrhea, fatigue, brain fog, muscle and joint pain. What many people don't know is that a candida infection left untreated for a long time can actually damage the brain because it causes this brain fog, and people are unable to think clearly. Um, So again, the treatment can be with a broad spectrum antifungal. Things like caprylic acid, oregano oil, berberine, and garlic are all examples that are used. But we really want to be careful again with this, with these kind of broad spectrum antifungals and antimicrobials. Sometimes they can do more harm than good by killing good bacteria or burning the intestinal lining. So a better approach is to holistically support all of the good things that can happen in the gut and feed it and treat it in the way to really nourish, and then these things will naturally correct. But sometimes a protocol is needed, um, depending on the levels of candida and the types of candida. There it is needed. Sometimes a specific candida protocol is needed to address this. Okay, so I'm going to stop here because we've reached the time limit. But if anyone wants to see the remainder of the presentation, you can join it on the Phoenix Learn platform. We do half an hour presentation, the complete presentation, and then the Q&A at the end. And on that presentation, I finished the reading of the GI stool map. But you can get an idea just from that of what is kind of derived from this sort of map. I'm going to check the questions. How can I get the tests like this? How can I get tested? So if you're a member of Push Health, Dr. Haider's telemedicine platform, you can order the GI stool map through there. There's a couple of companies that do it. Diagnostic Solutions is the one um, that you can order through Push Health, but there are a couple of other options also. So the result that I showed you in the presentation was by a company called Diagnostic Solutions. So someone asked if we could put a link of this presentation here. Yes, we can do that. And lately, I've been drinking my own elixir of lemon, chia, apple cider vinegar, and honey. Is it a good mixture, good for gut health? Yeah, so apple cider vinegar is really great for gut health, especially if it's the raw unpasteurized one, like the Briggs one, for example. And apple cider vinegar actually has the added benefit of being good at helping us regulate blood sugar. So if we drink apple cider vinegar before a meal, it can actually help us to flatten the glucose curve and the glucose spike from a meal that we have. So there is that extra added benefit. Yeah, with honey and lemon. So lemon is, of course, good, and honey is good depending on the type of honey. If it's a raw unpasteurized honey, those are the best, and also how much, because of course in the morning we generally want to focus on having low glycemic foods, because in the morning is when we've been fasting for quite a few hours, usually 12 hours or more. So our blood sugar is very sensitive to being spiked, which is why we want to focus on avoiding sugar in the morning. So if you're having a lot of honey, it might not be ideal, but just a small amount, especially if you're having it before a meal, sounds like a good way to start the day. Can you share a recipe of a good breakfast, gut healthy friendly recipe? Yes, I can definitely do that. I have actually a good site in mind with lots of really good gut recipes by a nutritionist that I like called Geordie Pie. I believe she's from New Zealand, but she has great gut health recipes. And there are many ways to kind of make ordinary breakfast foods, like, for example, oats, better for the gut by soaking the oats overnight. Things like slow cooking, using oat groats instead of the oat flakes, and soaking them or sprouting them. So there are many different things that we can do, and then obviously starting the day with, I mean, oats is not an example of this, although oats are good in that they are a good prebiotic fiber. And if you combine oats with something like Greek yogurt, you can even mix an egg into oats if you heat it really, really slowly. You can put low glycemic fruits. So although it's not the most low glycemic breakfast, it is good. It can be good for the in the sense of prebiotics. And if you add low glycemic fruits and a protein such as yogurt or cottage cheese, that can be good. And then of course there are all the more common things like pasture raised, organic bacon, eggs. Um, omelet, things that are much more low glycemic and high protein. So is raw juicing good for gut health? Is it good to drink these juice on a daily basis? So the only time I usually recommend juicing is when people have really, really bad gut health issues. So sometimes when people's gut health is so bad, they can't really tolerate fiber at all. And any kinds of vegetables and fruits will really disrupt their stomach and cause bloating and cause gas and cause irritation. And in that case, I recommend to people to do juicing because you still get the nutrients from the fruits and vegetables without the fiber. And then, of course, you would want to focus on low glycemic fruits and vegetables. Because the issue with juicing is that when the juice is there without the fiber, then that can really spike our blood sugar. So especially, I think this person mentioned carrot and apple. So both of those things are quite high in sugar. So if you drank carrot and apple juice, it would really spike your blood sugar because there's no fiber at all. So the thing that slows down the absorption of sugar into our blood is when the sugar is trapped in the matrix of fiber. And once that's removed, then it's immediately accessible to the body really quickly. So then we want to focus on really, really low glycemic fruits and vegetables for juicing. Um, except, well, also in the case, but I would say it's not a practice that we should think of as like, oh, this is a really healthy practice that I should aim to integrate in my life daily. It's more if I have a real issue with gut health where I can't even tolerate any fiber at all, then this is a good avenue to go down. Um, and I know that juicing is often framed as this kind of detox health trend that's really great. And in many ways, this doesn't really make sense because of this issue with the blood sugar spiking. Um, so someone asked about tapeworms, the remedies for tapeworms. I would have to research specifically because in terms of protocols for parasite cleansing and worm cleansing, they're really specific, and it's good to work with a practitioner actually on these kinds of things. It's like any kind of detoxification, and even a candida protocol. It can be really complicated actually because it's so bio individualized, and you need to find out what is causing that thing because it's not that that thing spontaneously came to you. It's that the environment of your gut basically was compromised, and then because of that, that thing was allowed to go live in your gut. So the idea is not just about eradication, it's about figuring out why the environment was susceptible to that invasion, and then working on that as a whole, because otherwise if you just work on eradicating, it will just come back again in a few months. um, so yeah, with all of these types of cleanses and parasite cleanse and candida cleanse, I think it's good to bear that in mind. Oh, great. I think that's all the questions for today. I'm going to make a note of those two things that people asked for. And yeah, thanks for listening to the gut health. Oh, Wait, so there's one more question. Which is better, juicing or making smoothies with the same vegetable and fruit combination? So yeah, again, this depends on um, if you're the kind of person who drinks a smoothie, and because you have really really bad gut health, the fiber in those fruits and vegetables causes gas, causes bloating, causes gastric distress, basically. Then you would do better with a juice. Um, but if you're not on that level of compromised gut health, then having a smoothie is better because the fiber will actually trap some of the sugars into like the sugars are locked inside a matrix of fiber, and then that's more work for your body to break down, which means it will spike the blood sugar less. So if eating a whole fruit spikes the blood sugar a certain amount, a smoothie will spike it a bit more because the fibers are broken down, and a juice will spike it the most because there's no fiber. So it's kind of on that level from a point of view of blood sugar spiking. So this is important to keep in mind. Okay, I think this is it for the live today. I think Monica already put up the Phoenix Protocol. Oh yes, so here it is. If you scan this, you can learn more about the Phoenix Health Coaching course that we do, where we have a call every single week to talk about different subjects related to long COVID recovery. There's also the Phoenix Learn, where you'll have access to the full presentations of what we share just a portion of in the Facebook Lives. So if you're interested in that, you can check it out there. And otherwise, thanks very much for listening, and I will see you next week. Bye bye.